put it in the comments. And we're now recording and presenting, which is exciting. Not really. Okay, annotated bibliographies. So scores are in, this was rough. This was rough, and I recognize that it was rough. And I think part of it may have had to do with the fact that we lose time this year. We lose time this year in terms of classroom stuff. Huh. Okay. Thanks. And as a result, when we don't get to spend some time doing things in class, I'm not catching and able to necessarily anticipate problems that I might see. But it is vital that you recognize that details matter. The details of those things matter. I was hard on you, and I recognize that I was hard on you. People will frequently come away from second semester feeling like, I've been really hard on you, and I will hear then at the beginning of the year that people are concerned about how difficult the class is going to be as a result of that. Hi. Thanks. All kinds of business. And so at the same time, I remain true to my vow that I made with you early on in the year, that I will take care of you as best as I can, okay? So I'm not going to allow, this one particular assignment to be the thing that determines, whether or not you get that higher grade at the end of the semester. If you demonstrate to me through the rough draft and the final draft that you're able to pay attention to those details that you need to be paying attention to, then we'll eliminate or do whatever it is that we have to do to allow you to reach that next level. But ultimately, I don't know what it's like in college when even you accidentally plagiarize, because to the best of my knowledge, I never made that mistake. I do know I've got a niece who was kicked out of her college because of plagiarism, because she went to a school that just did not teach her the ins and outs of the things that she needed to do. I have a colleague here who has a friend, and now it becomes, somebody's sister's roommate. But I've got a colleague here whose friend was kicked out of school for plagiarism, academic dishonesty. So you want to make sure that you're paying attention to those details. The punctuation of the bibliography, the things that you need to put into the bibliography itself, and then when you're summarizing and paraphrasing, that you're putting into quotation marks the things that are directly from that source. So there's a couple of things on here that I want you to make sure that you look at, okay? This is a big element of academic dishonesty. It's hard to tell the difference between not meaning to not quote things and the intent to deceive. And so when you're making the mistakes, you start to raise flags of, I need to pay careful attention to what it is that you're doing. And I'm going to be tougher with the comb that I'm using. I'm going to be using, one of those lice combs rather than, one that you might need to just kind of, comb your hair. As we move forward, if there's still a problem, scores are going to be worse. They're not going to be, this was actually generous in terms of the kinds of things that I expect that you'll see in college. But I want you to get it so that you don't run into this problem as you move forward. It is a tedious process of making sure that you get the things right. If you find yourself in a situation where you're trying to compose in one tab and then you've got another tab that's open, that's where a big part of the problem is going to be coming in. If you can handwrite, I would recommend that you do your drafting written first so that you can look at the screen and kind of compare at the same time. Because when I was working with my laptop, I was like, oh my God, this is killing me. I can't spend all day going through these little bits and showing you exactly where the quotation needs to be and the ellipses and the brackets and the modifications that you make under the circumstances that you're making minor modifications to the source within your own work. So be mindful of that. Or alternatively, you might print up the source and be typing. But I don't know that you all have access to the printer. One of the reasons that I recommend the handwriting of your drafting is that then when you key it in, you're forcing yourself to make an additional draft. So you're forcing yourself to kind of revise as you go. And you want to make sure under those circumstances that anything that you've got in quotation marks either stays in quotation marks or you make the proper modifications. So to be able to see both at the same time is a valuable experience. So unless you've got like a bigger screen like I've got here, and you can maybe like minimize your windows, but even then you're going to cause yourself eye strain. Or if you've got two screens, then that would be another circumstance under which you'd be able to kind of do the two. I wouldn't recommend working from your phone and using a screen. I happen to have like a computer at my house and my laptop, and so under those circumstances, I kind of have two screens. So that might be a possible solution. So again, tedious, I get it. And so that's why you don't want to wait until the last minute. You want to absolutely not wait until the last minute. And we are going to have time to work on this in class as we move forward. So there are two links here that I want you to make sure that you're aware of at the very least. The first, I'm not sure where New Paltz EDU is, but and then there are additional links here. But one of the things that it discusses at this site, copying sentences and or phrases from, I need to share it. Let me share the tab. Share this tab instead. Yes, please. So we've got, other links. We've got an article, Why Does It Matter If You Plagiarize, from Harvard, taking careful notes. And then there's more about writing about art, which is not a thing that we need to worry about right now. So in terms of the copying of sentences and or phrases from a source without putting them in quotation marks, and without using, and in our case, a parenthetical documentation to identify the source, or explaining where it's coming from. So, for example, if you use S.J. Miller and Josh M. Slifkin, you might write Miller and Slifkin express whatever it is that they say. Even if it's a paraphrase, even if you're not using a direct quote, because the idea is coming from Miller and Slifkin. So you absolutely want to stay on top of these things. So the rule of thumb here, more than 3 consecutive words, not counting short words such as a, the, but, in, an, or an. And ultimately, the sources that you're working with, those authors didn't invent those particular words. But it's the idea that you also need to make sure that you're citing. You don't have to put in quotation marks the idea, especially if you've changed the words, because that's misquoting. So you want to be careful. We've also got a kind of a cautionary tale within here. Beware of the too close paraphrase. Some students get into trouble by quoting 3 or 4 words without quotation marks, putting in a bridge of a few of their own words, and then another short quoted phrase without quotation marks, another bridge of their own words, etc. That it's a form of plagiarism. be careful, be conscious, be aware of just those little details of what you need to do. And again, I really suspect that it's because of the fact that we're dealing with, trying to do everything on the same device. I suspect that that's a big part of our problem. False documentation. Yeah, you want to be careful with that too. False documentation, putting something in your works cited page that you don't actually cite. That is going to cause you problems. That will impact your score. So if you put something in the works cited page and you don't actually reference it, that impacts you. Similarly, if you cite something in the paper and then it doesn't appear on the works cited page, that is another, it's an act of plagiarism. It's not necessarily intent to deceive. It was a mistake that you made. But I don't want you to make these mistakes because I don't know what the consequences are. The only consequence that I'm absolutely sure of is that, given however many circumstances that it happens or the severity of, what it is that you've done, I don't want anybody losing scholarships or admissions, period. So be careful. There is another one that I've got here from Yale, some strategies. If you find yourself with a high similarity report from Turnitin, believe me, does not catch everything. So, there may be like an 8% similarity report, but in looking carefully at the product that was provided, in some cases, there were some where, if I'm thinking about the Barry Gilmore Standing on Merit article, we've got this list of 10 criterion that play a part in identifying literary merit and what is meritorious. And if you pick one word from here and then you modify this phrase and then you pick another word from here, and in order, there's a plagiarism issue that's going on there that Turnitin is not necessarily going to catch. So you want to be careful. Again, and I think there's some other stuff provided by Yale at the bottom here. Suggestions for what to do, set the source aside. So read it through once, put it aside, do your writing, come back, compare the two, make sure that you're not, doing anything that is going to raise flags. And so some suggestions. I think that covers everything. Again, it's not going to be a redo opportunity, but because ultimately I'm going to see this work again with the rough draft. The rough draft is your redo opportunity. And I won't allow this to be like the game changer, the decider for, whether or not you make that next level. But if, there's a pattern, then there's a problem. So if you recognize this in yourself, as we're moving forward and you feel like you need help, let me know, ask for help. But you got to pay attention to the details. I had a comment from a student and it was nobody in here. And so I'm not pointing fingers. Somebody indicated that they did their bibliography the same way that they used to do it in middle school. That's not where we are anymore. I have colleagues who swear up and down that you do things a certain way, and they are blissfully, perhaps, unaware of the fact that MLA has changed their format fairly recently, within the past 5 years. In fact, the first year that we were doing this particular project, students were still using the word web or print within their bibliographies, and that changed at the very end of that school year. And I reached as many of my students as I possibly could who had gone on to college and said, be aware, MLA has changed their format. So don't rely on the things that you have previously done. They will modify things every now and then, ultimately because they're jerks. But, so does anybody have any questions about that? I wanted to make sure that, that you're reminded that I will take care of you as best as I can. Are we okay? Okay. All right. Then, the Tempest. Folks at home, you're going to do your work in discussions. And I'm giving you about 20 minutes. So, 15 minutes from now, that takes us to about 9:30. So come back about 9:35 to engage with discussions. You've got 2 questions there that you're going to be working with. And then you're going to, 15 minutes to respond to those 2 questions, and then 5 minutes to respond to someone else's work, okay? And then you guys are working with index cards. But you're going to have to write small. Because if you look at these questions, at least the second one. But one side is lined, so that's good, right? It is. Kind of with both sides. Take your portfolio. Have you heard from schools? Are you going for art?
I'm not.
No, you're not?
No.
How come? Do you love art?
I do. I want to do something
Where you want to make more money?
making money, yeah.
See, my daughter, my youngest, she wants to go into veterinary medicine, but
Okay.
she is a really good artist and with no background at all.
Wow.
Of course, I'm speaking as her dad, but I mean, she, as an 8th grader, I mean, I've seen her draw hands and all
And
sorts.
she thought about maybe she could do illustrations for textbooks.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a lot of money in that either,
Yeah.
but at the same, I mean, we're letting our oldest go into screenwriting, and so there's not money in that either,
Yeah.
unless you write that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, all right, I understand.
She could do design.
I understand. Yeah, design too. Ooh, I did something to my back. So your answer in the room, your first answer to the first question, you might put on the online side. What value is there in reading Hagseed before the Tempest? And then for the second one, with the lines, write small and try to fit that in there. So you guys with the cards, go ahead and stop that thought or finish that thought. It's okay. It doesn't have to be a complete thing. I just want to see, what your thinking is. Okay. I've been delighted with a lot of the things that I'm seeing. And then exchange so that you can kind of make a note. Because we only have 6 minutes left, soon to be 5. Don't overthink it. Go ahead and trade. You only got 5 minutes left. And comment on, if you would, one thing that you like, one thing that you wonder. Yep.
I'm not either.
It is fine. Yeah, you can trade. Go ahead and trade. It'll be fine. Don't worry. I won't judge either.
I'll finish at second block. And then I'll bring it back. Oh my God. No, I'll bring it back.
It doesn't have to be finished. If you imagine that I thought that these were going to be finished, you are out of your mind. I would have given you longer if I wanted them finished. I know you're not going to be able to finish it. I am not such a fool as that. Just about 2 minutes. And I've got this weird feeling that I just want to rip off my mask right now. What's up with that? Man.
I like how your writing was almost like it. Oh. I don't know.
So go ahead and take a look at what people have responded, how they've responded, if you haven't already. And while you're perusing that, I want to address one wonderful question that came from your class in the connection between Joseph Campbell and Thomas Foster. And it was not related to either one of those. But Nicole had asked about the missing teeth, about the dentures. Is that correct? And so I want you to consider this possibility, okay? At the end, is it at the end? Maybe it's not at the end. No, it's not at the end. So I've got to find the passage. What act is that? Act 4. Is this right? And you don't necessarily need the context, so I don't think I'm going to give it. Aha! Oh. And I remember now why he says it. There it is. So if you have your book, your play, page 69, Act 4, Scene 1, line 146, Prospero says, "You do look, my son, in a moved sort, as if you were dismayed. Be cheerful, sir. Our revels now are ended. These our actors, as I foretold you, were all spirits, and are melted into air, into thin air. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which it inherit, shall dissolve, and like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. Sir, I am vexed. Bear with my weakness, my old brain is troubled. Be not disturbed with my infirmity. If you be pleased, retire into my cell, and there repose. A turn or two, I'll walk to still my beating mind. But the notion that we are such stuff as dreams are made on, how much of it is true? How much of Hagseed is even true? Is it possible that it's all just a dream? And so, in response to Nicole's question about the dentures, my suggestion is that in dreams, when we lose our teeth, that is a representation of loss. That someone that is close to us is about to die, or that we have recently lost someone, that there is a loss under those circumstances. Or ultimately, another way that we could look at it is Felix living in a dreamlike state for the bulk of those 12 years that he's in isolation. And so in that span of time is that when he's losing his teeth and, so on and so forth. And so there's just different ways that we can go about, kind of approaching things and looking at things. If you were asked to write about a symbol as the FRQ 3 has sometimes asked, you could talk in theory about his dentures. You'd want to know what you're talking about, but you could talk about that notion and whether or not it is a dream. You'd have to probably tie in a little bit of The Tempest and talk about interpretation of the work as a whole, that ultimately our lives are temporary and often dreamlike. Think about those times where you have experienced something and you're like, did that really just happen? Did that actually just happen to me? How did I not see that coming? Or, I totally saw that coming. So just, that sort of weird kind of thing. So I've got a video that I want to share with you. It's just under 20 minutes. And just kind of think about what it is that we're seeing here. And so folks at home, go ahead and turn off your camera to mitigate any kind of sound issues. Hopefully it won't be awful. And I will do the same on my end.
All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. Welcome, my fellow players. This year marks the 400th anniversary of William Shakespeare's death, and millions of people are still watching, acting, and reading his plays in 118 different languages all around the world. And more than 2 billion copies of his plays have been sold. Somebody once asked me what I thought Shakespeare would say if he gave a TED Talk. I said, I had no idea, but he would definitely want to know who's been cashing all his royalty checks, right? When he owes that man some money. As a visiting actor and instructor, I have the great privilege of teaching Shakespeare's plays to teenage and preteen students. In my experience, getting kids to appreciate and even love him is easy. This is what I do. When I first get to a classroom, before I have a chance to say a single word, I have one of the students come up to me and spit in my face. This accomplishes 2 things. 1, it wakes up the class, doesn't it? And that's important because so many people hear the name Shakespeare and they're seized with a sudden urge to sleep, right? Or worse, to throw up. It's no wonder that the 2 most popular translations of his plays into modern English are called No Fear Shakespeare and No Sweat Shakespeare. Fear and sweat. Sounds like fun, doesn't it? But my surprise spitting serves another purpose. It transforms me from some boring bald guy with a Shakespeare shirt into Shylock from The Merchant of Venice. And Shylock has just been spit upon for the last time by that smug, hypocritical, anti-Semite Antonio. He hath disgraced me and hindered me 500,000, laughed at my losses, mocked at my gains, scorned my nation, thwarted my bargains, cooled my friends, heated mine enemies. And what's his reason? I am a Jew. Hath not a Jew eyes? Hath not a Jew hands? Organs, dimensions, senses, affections, passions. If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? And if you wrong us, shall we not revenge? If we are like you in the rest, we will resemble you in that. An angry man, Shylock. Thank you. Thank you. But maybe he has good reason to be. I was teaching a class of high school seniors recently, and as I was waiting there for my designated spitter to turn me into Shylock, I noticed some posters on the wall. They were covered with pictures of bombed out cities, troops in formation, Nazi flags, tanks, and so on. One poster was entitled, "The Brutal Human." It showed emaciated prisoners at Auschwitz concentration camp and a lampshade made of human skin. So, when I became Shylock and I asked, if you poison us, do we not die? I pointed right at that poster. And in that moment, in that suddenly silent room, every kid got Shylock. They got Shakespeare. Shakespeare's plays aren't relics. They aren't fossilized bones that we dig up, scrutinize, and catalog. The characters he created are alive. And they have secrets to tell us, even after all these years. But we can only learn their secrets by listening to them, by watching them, by becoming them. And none of that's possible if we confine them to ink and paper. If we want children to appreciate and even love Shakespeare, They need to experience his plays through performance. So, is the point to turn every kid into the next Matt Damon or Natalie Portman? No. Although most of the kids wouldn't mind that at all. The point is, wonderful things happen when we get kids on their feet to act out Shakespeare's text. First and foremost, they understand him. Reading by itself is never enough. But when you combine reading with listening and watching and acting, suddenly Shakespeare's characters and his language, they come to light. It exposes them to the most powerful, most influential writing in the English language. It builds confidence. If a student can unravel and act out a scene or a speech from Hamlet or Julius Caesar or Much Ado About Nothing, now, lots of other tasks might seem relatively easy. Strengthens public speaking abilities. Again, if a student can get in front of an audience and move them with their words, with their acting, that's a skill they'll be able to use for the rest of their lives. 5, it channels passion. Children can be intense, emotional people, and their attentions can be fleeting. Shakespeare keeps them engaged and gives them a healthy and creative means of expressing themselves. And finally, 6, Shakespeare teaches universal life lessons. When children become his characters, when they act out his stories, they get to explore new possibilities of existence without having to live them first. In other words, while Shakespeare won't always turn kids into great actors, he can help turn them into great people. Now, I suspect that most of us, forced to study Shakespeare in our youth, didn't receive all these miraculous benefits. But let's find out, by a show of hands, who read the following plays in high school or junior high? Julius Caesar. All right. Midsummer Night's Dream. Oh, a few more hands. Romeo and Juliet. Oh, that's nearly everybody. Did anybody have to analyze a sonnet? Oh, I'm so sorry. All those for whom Shakespeare was a source of delight and inspiration in school, let me hear a hearty huzzah. Ready? Huzzah. Okay, not bad, but many fewer. Let's face it, for most of us, Shakespeare in school was uncomfortable, unwelcome, and of uncertain value. A sort of literary enema, right? I mean, that's what it felt like for me. I mean, I knew I was supposed to like him. I just couldn't. He was too awful. It wasn't until after college when I realized that the playwright I learned to hate in the classroom was nothing like the one I learned to love in the theater. What I'm saying is that Shakespeare isn't the problem. The problem is how he's been taught. He's the world's most famous author for good reason. No writer, not Homer, not Dante, not Cervantes, not J.K. Rowling, rivals him in terms of his art or influence. His characters have become part of our mental landscape. For example, even if you haven't read or seen a single play, you might be familiar with this man, right? That would be Hamlet. And this woman. Right? And maybe this guy right here. That would be Bottom, Midsummer Night's Dream. Sort of an ass, Bottom, yeah. And of course, these two star-crossed lovers. And how about all his words? Shakespeare wrote 884,000 of them. He's credited with being the first to use or inventing more than 2,000. Here are a few of them. Might recognize some in there. Cold-blooded, bedroom, bedazzled, assassination, affliction. For today's purposes, however, maybe the most important word he was among the first to use is our theme. Reverberate. Yeah. TEDx 2016. Brought to you by our sponsor, William Shakespeare. Yeah. He's not getting paid for it, but there he is. And finally, how about all those famous sayings? He's easily the most quoted author of all times. If we had every one, if we were able to list every one of his, well-known sayings, we'd be here forever and a day, right? So let's start with forever and a day. Here are a few more. You probably know a few of those up there. A few of my personal favorites. To thine own self be true. Brevity is the soul of wit. Something wicked this way comes. That's a good one for Halloween. Brave new world. And of course, the granddaddy of them all. We're going to do this one together, right? Ready? To be or not to be. Yes. In case you didn't get the memo, that is the question. Yes. So, if Shakespeare's so brilliant, why is he also such a pain for students, for many teachers, and I think for many of you listening to me right now? Here's a hint. Were his plays meant to be read silently or aloud? What do you think? Aloud, right? Wrong. Trick question. His plays weren't meant to be read at all. They were meant to be heard and watched and acted. They were meant to be experienced. He wasn't a historian. He wasn't even a novelist. He was a playwright. And plays should be performed. Doesn't that make sense? Imagine trying to appreciate Adele or Dr. Dre or Billy Joel or Prince by studying their lyrics, but never listening to or singing one of their songs. Or would all those fans of the latest blockbuster Hollywood hit really pay good money to go into a theater and analyze the script? I don't think so. And yet, that's what we do to Shakespeare when we treat his plays merely as fodder for exams and essays instead of what they could be, opportunities for joy. When I first began teaching Shakespeare, I met a 7th grade girl I'll call Maria. Maria was a natural actress, captivating, confident, intuitive, vulnerable. When she would play Juliet, it was like she'd written the lines herself. It was wonderful. Her teacher told me that Maria had been through a lot of personal tragedy. Her mother had left when she was little. Her father had recently died of a drug overdose. She was quiet and shy, didn't fit in, not a good student. But when she got in front of the class and performed Shakespeare, she radiated a happiness that everyone can see. And she was fabulous. So I was new at this back then, and so I was curious. So I asked her one day what it was about Shakespeare she enjoyed so much. Cheerfully, without hesitation, she said, because I can pretend to be somebody else for a while. Maria's answer for me is at the heart of why learning Shakespeare through performance is so valuable. When children become his characters or see another person become one of his characters, when they mourn the loss of a loved one as King Lear, or wrestle with depression as Hamlet, or fall hopelessly in love as Juliet, they get a chance to feel what they might not be able to express in words. In Shakespeare's words, they learn that they are not all alone unhappy in this world, that beauty lives with kindness, that there's a divinity that shapes their ends, that their life is a miracle. So, a few action items before I leave you. For all my wonderful English teachers out there, I know you have a million things to do during the school year, and I hope Shakespeare play is one of them. I encourage you to view him not as another bitter pill your students have to swallow, but as an extraordinary teaching opportunity. Get your kids on their feet to act out his text, Don't just have them analyze a passage, have them also memorize and perform it. Make them watch a few scenes on YouTube. Maybe invite an actor to class. I hear they don't have much to do during the day. I know if you do these things, you're going to be pleasantly surprised. For my parents, grandparents, and all those traumatized by high school memories of Shakespeare, give the man another chance. treat your kids to one of his plays. Some tips before you get to the theater. Read a synopsis of the play. Figure out who the characters are. Maybe find a few famous lines and talk about them with your kids. Then, sit as close to the action as you can, right in the splash zone. And don't panic when the wave of words washes over you, because it will. That's kind of the point. Besides, nobody understands every word of a Shakespeare play. Easy comprehension has never been his goal. His goal is simple: to make the coming hour o'erflow with joy and pleasure drown the brim. Joy can be a scarce commodity for some children, as it can be for all of us. School is difficult. Life is difficult, and difficult things are often unpleasant. But Shakespeare should always be an opportunity for joy. And joy can be the difference between a child hardly trying and trying hard, between dropping out and showing up, between hiding in the shadows off stage and embracing their unique role in this epic production called life. All the world's a stage. Thank you.
So, I almost made a tragic mistake and logged out of the meeting. It's like, no, that's the wrong red button. I don't want to hit that red button. So is there anything in there that stood out to you? I was expressing earlier to Evelyn that this morning that I would love for us to be able to, kind of read it with us and maybe get on our feet. And I just hit a bell and the stupid camera is jacked up. I don't know what Starkweather does in here sometimes. Anyway, but my fear is that some of us in the room might be too quiet, and then asking you folks at home who are sometimes internet unstable, not knowing who knows. So that inhibits our being able to kind of assign parts and read it aloud. I have a tremendous, great resource that will allow us to watch ultimately the text almost in its entirety. And the reason I say almost in its entirety is because whenever a director does Shakespeare today, and ultimately whenever a director does Shakespeare, period, they will make cuts. They'll be like, so what are the elements that we need to focus on? And that never became more clear to me than when I performed in Othello at Notre Dame a couple of summers ago. And there were, huge speeches that my character would have had that were eliminated, and things were condensed. In some cases, some things were kind of shifted around just for dramatic purposes. And in some cases, entire scenes are eliminated just because it does not, forward whatever conflict it is that the director is hoping to convey. The hitch with this particular production, it comes to us from Stratford, which is where what the Makeshewig Festival that Felix works for is based on, is that Prospero is actually Prospera. And so I don't know exactly how that dynamic kind of shifts things around to have a female Prospero. However, I've seen a female King Lear, and they did not change her to Queen. No, I've only done one production. It was and it was the Othello. But the guy who played Othello is now on TV, which is kind of cool. We get to sit and watch and go, oh, there's Esau, which is kind of cool. But And there are other choices that directors make, which, I kind of want to emphasize as well. So for instance, in Othello, the director deliberately made the villain Iago Latino to push a racial conflict. And the prostitute was Filipino. And so he was highlighting a lot of racial tensions in our country in response to, and it occurred, this production occurred 1 year after the anniversary of the White Pride March in Virginia. Back in, what was that, 2017, I think. So, he was highlighting things very specifically and on purpose, and set it in the modern era. So, directors can make choices and changes. So we've got some things that I want you to take a look at within Roman numeral 3, some common motifs. The legend is that this is Shakespeare's last play. And we're told that on Roman numeral page, where is it? Come on. Where is it? There we go. LXIII. What is that? 53 or 43? Or 63? I think it's 63 in Roman numerals. L is 50, right? And the 10 comes after, 63. And if I'm wrong, please correct me. The Tempest is probably the last play wholly written by Shakespeare. And so that means, there may be other ones that are out there that are contributed to by Shakespeare. Some common motifs: how clothes make a person, yet appearances can be deceiving. As I pointed out with the whole Felix and the dentures and the smiling in the mirror, and then Tony's representation, and that Hamlet link. One may smile and be a villain. Just because somebody looks nice doesn't mean that they are. If you read Macbeth last year, and how many of you did read Macbeth last year? Any Macbeth readers last year? Did we have Macbeth readers last year? They didn't do that one last year? Okay. So there's a line from that: the Thane of Cawdor lives. Why do you dress me in borrowed robes? Oh, that feels uncomfortable. These aren't mine. The notion of the missing mother, and there's a comic that goes to that, but also the emphasis on fathers and daughters, the relationship between fathers and daughters, and mothers and sons. The notion of the authentic self, and that question that ultimately is what drives most of literature. Who am I? Who am I? Who are you as a person? And so you might check out that Corinthians link, and it's something to keep in mind. Putting away childish things. What is the childish thing that Felix hangs on to? What is the childish thing that Felix hangs on to? What makes us not want to view him as heroic? Yeah, it's revenge, that desire for revenge. How childish. How foolish. Because he's just harming himself under those circumstances. And we'll take a look at that at the beginning of next class too, what that can do to an individual when you hang on to, anger and rage. Well, we can look at Darth Vader and figure out what happens when you hang on to anger and rage. The notion of theater and magic, that theater is magical. There's another production that students looked at last year that was designed by who is the actor who plays, and I'm not even going to, Gollum. Who's the actor who plays Gollum? He does a lot of that CGI character thing. Andy Serkis, Serkis. I think that's his name. And he played Ulysses Claw in Black Panther, and some other stuff. So he's a big CGI actor. So he's got a special effects company, and man, the special effects for this show, we may take a look at that as well as the Stratford. The psychology of the id, the ego, and the superego. And we might ask ourselves, does Felix, by the end of Hagseat, finally develop his superego? The role of providence and fate and fortune, destiny and accident. When is something that feels destined just a happy accident? Or when are the accidents supposed to happen? These are tricky sorts of questions. The notion of dreams and reality, the distinction between the two. Time, the role of time, past, present, and future. We want to live in the now. We don't want to dwell on the past. We don't want to skip things to get to what's going to happen. Evelyn again and I talked about having end dates in mind. But just because you've got the end date in mind, try to find the things in the meantime that you can enjoy and savor and relish. The notion of the natural world versus the civilized world, and how one is order and one is chaos, or how both are both. The natural world is both ordered and chaotic, and the civilized world is both ordered and chaotic. And manliness as well. The only female character that we have, as a matter of fact, is Miranda, and the importance of knowing one's place. And that's a motif that we'll look at in our next text as well. Where do you belong is an important concept. And then, of course, revenge. So we've only got like 2 minutes, but I want you to kind of hear, because I am going to ask you to read before we view. And so we'll read Act 1 for homework, and then we'll watch Act 1 on Monday during class, and maybe a little bit more. But hear it. So I've turned to page 3, and I'm looking at Tempest, Act 1, and I'm going to just run out of time, but I'm going to go up to the end. On a ship at sea, a tempestuous noise of thunder and lightning. How did they do that in the era of Shakespeare? Enter a shipmaster and a boatswain, and as I'm thinking about what's going on and where they are, it's like, what do these voices sound like? Boatswain, here, master, what cheer? Good, speak to the mariners. Fall to it yarely, or we run ourselves aground. Bestir, bestir. So you might hear pirates, maybe. Okay? So listen to it. Don't be afraid to read it aloud and make a fool of yourself. And as you notice things, mark them, and be willing to ask questions. Okay? Have a great weekend, and I'll see you Monday.
Mr. Coffee?
Yes.
All the Tempest.
Thank you, Mr. Coffey.
Available to pay for anything.
Thanks, Dylan. What's that, Nicole?